everybody, it is Professor Parrish, and I hope you all are having a great Father's Day weekend. I am recording this video for this coming week, which is week 3 in the class already. Isn't that crazy? For Module 3, June 19th to the 25th. So yeah, we've got quite a few things that are due this week, but I think some of them are not going to take up too much of your time, so I want to go ahead and kind of get into this week. We're going to talk about the second paper, talk about the first exam that we'll have in this class, and then the stuff moving on into next week. So if you look at our module guide for this week, we are starting poetry, which is kind of crazy that we're already through short story and into poetry. But don't worry, if you like short stories, we will have a chance to go back through them. A lot of the concepts and terminology that we are taking from short story, like the terms such as the elements, such as plot, character, point of view, theme, symbolism, talking about setting, those are all things that have their roots in short story, but will apply to poetry and to drama and to the research that we're going to do later. So if you're kind of sad that we're moving on from short story for now, don't worry. When we get to our research paper, you will have a chance to actually go back and talk more about it. So that's really exciting. But yeah, let's talk about Module 3. So we are starting poetry, and I know for a lot of students, poetry is not their favorite. And I understand that because poetry is a very acquired taste. I have a lot of students tell me they don't like poetry because 1, they don't get it. 2, they want it to have characters and plot, and a lot of times poetry just doesn't have that. It's more about emotion and more about the descriptions and the tone and symbolism than it necessarily is with a setting or plot or characters. And a lot of them just want a concise story through their literature that they look at, and poetry doesn't have to tell a story. It can just be a poem about a moment or a poem about a specific thing or emotion. It doesn't have to necessarily go anywhere. And a lot of people kind of get turned off by that, but my goal with this unit, even though it is very short for summer, is that hopefully by the time you end your readings and the poems that you look at, even if you don't like poetry, I want you to have an appreciation of it. So a respect for poetry, because our old textbook that we used to use for this class, they started out the poetry section with a picture of Michael Jordan and a poem about basketball. And I always asked my students, I said, why do you think Michael Jordan is the emblematic representation for poetry? And a lot of students were like, we don't know, it's basketball. How does that have anything to do with poetry? And what we've talked about was the fact that Michael Jordan, if you don't know him, he was in Space Jam, the original Space Jam, and he was, a member of the Chicago Bulls in the 90s. He was one of my favorite NBA players. But so I'm confident in saying this, but Michael Jordan was considered one of the best NBA players in the 90s, maybe of all time, who knows? But I guess that depends on your preferences. But the point was, poetry is often seen as the best of literature. A good poet will choose the best language, the best structure, the best way of presenting their argument through their imagery, symbolism, what have you. And a good poem will do things so concisely. Because, you can read novels and stories that go on and are very, very flagrant with their language, but poetry has to be concise. It has to be direct and distinct. It can't just ramble on, right? Not usually, or at least a good poem won't. So the readings for this week are talking about how to read a poem on page 692, listening to the voice, like how is the poet trying to present the poem to you? What is their tone? Are they trying to be serious? Are they being funny? Are they being sarcastic? That section is going to talk about that. And then there's different elements of poetry, talking about the words, how we choose the correct word on page 731. Sayings and suggestions. What is the poem trying to suggest to you to think about? Talking about imagery. Imagery is huge in poetry. It wants you to understand what things look like. And then figures of speech. Like, is it trying to, say something with the poetry specifically? What is it trying to do? And then writing about a poem is on pages 1808 to 1829. So if you're curious about how to go about writing a poem, or if you never did it in high school or anything like that, that section will talk to you about it as well. But we have 4 assignments due Sunday: the discussion forum, the short story exam, the reading response, and your paper 2 thesis and outline, which I want to go over. We'll save the outline for last because I want to talk about the guidelines for the paper then. But the discussion forum for this week, I really like this discussion forum. This is a lot of fun. So there's a website here. I'm going to go ahead and click on it, called Poetry Out Loud. And you're going to notice there are some categories here. So what you're going to do, what the discussion forum is asking you to do, is to choose a poem, and if it has an option, listen to it. Now, not all of the poems will have a listening option. Some of them will, some of them won't. Some of the poems have been spoken out loud, so you'll be able to hear someone say it. Not all of them do. So I want you to go to this site and choose a category. You'll notice there's 3 pages of category. There was a lot to go over. But I'm going to go here, this first one, and do like social justice and equality. And so you'll see there's some poems here. Like we to do, which one do I want to do? I will do the rights of women. And this one you can see does not have a way to listen to the poem, but you can read it, and then there's a bio about the poem. This poem's a little bit older. So what I want you to do is choose a poem. If you get a chance to listen to it, you can. Which poem did you choose and why? Reading the poem versus hearing it spoken. What is the biggest difference you would expect? Now, if your poem did not have an audio option, I want you to read the poem out loud to yourself. So, and that may seem silly, but sometimes when you read a poem out loud to yourself, your mind and your voice will automatically start to get into a cadence and a rhythm because your brain is keeping up that the words are written in a certain pattern, that it automatically makes your voice kind of inflect in certain ways. It's the craziest thing, right? But it happens because your brain is like, oh, well, this is how I say this. So it's automatically creating a rhythm whether you realize it subconsciously or not. So some of you will have a poem, like a little audio option that will let you listen to it. Others will not. So if your poem that you choose does not have that option, go ahead and read it out loud and then explain in number 2 here, what is the biggest difference you would expect from reading versus just listening to the poem? Because it is a different experience to hear poetry versus reading it to yourself. And then of the terminology in the poetry chapters that were assigned in the previous moment when I was looking at the guidelines, which term do you think is the most interesting so far? So of, these different things like listening to a voice, words, saying and suggestion, imagery, figures of speech, there's going to be terms in bold. Which of those terms do you think is the most interesting so far when dealing with poetry? But yeah, you all are going to find there is a ton. It may take you 5 or 10 minutes to look through all of these examples and figure out which one you want to do, right? So if I do like travel, there's poems about like Istanbul 1983. I was hoping to find one that had an actual thing you could listen about it, but I don't know if usually it'll give you like a poem with a thing. So if you find an audio clip, that'll be great. But that is the discussion forum that's due by Sunday. So the next thing is the short story exam. Now, I am not a test taker. I don't like tests. So as far as the exams go, they're really just short quizzes. So this is worth 25 points. I'm going to show you the preview of it. When you click on it, it is not timed. So you can take as long as you like on this exam. Just make sure that you submit it when you're done, okay? So you'll notice here that you have a matching section that's 10 points, and you just choose from the drop down which definition matches the term. You also have some multiple choice, some more matching, and some short answer questions. There's only 6 questions on the entire quiz. It's not very lengthy. I don't make the quizzes or tests hard because, again, I want to measure you as a writer, not as a test taker. So just note that they tell you how many points each are worth. Please don't leave any blank. Try your best on all the questions. The worst thing you can do is not answer something because you may get a point even if you don't know the answer. But here's a hint. The answers are in your book. I'm not going to make this difficult. No. Now, one thing to note about this quiz submission, you'll notice there's that submit quiz button down there at the bottom. The test is not timed. However, it is due, you'll see over here, I'm going to highlight it on the right-hand side. It is due June 25th at 11:59 p.m. Now, you have to turn it in by that time. It does not let you go over that time. All of the tests and quizzes are set to automatically shut down at 11:59 p.m. I have had many students start to take this exam at 11 o'clock at night on Sunday, and then they reach 11:59 and it turns it in for them, and they're only like halfway through, and then they email me and they're like, Miss Parrish, I didn't get to finish my quiz. And I'm like, well, that's because you ran out of time. So make sure you don't do that. Make sure you start this very early, get it done quickly, and then you won't have to worry about it. Like I said, it's only 6 questions. It should take you like half an hour at most if you're looking through your book just to get it done. So just be sure to get that out of the way, but don't wait till the last minute to start it because it will shut down at 11:59 p.m. And then the reading response is kind of like what we've been doing. We're now just looking at poetry. So chapters 15 through 20, I want you to find 4 poems. Now, that seems like a lot, but you'll notice a lot of these poems in this book are like 2 or 3 verses. They're not long. They're very short poems. But I want you to find 4 poems. I want you to tell me what those 4 poems are. Why did you pick them? Based on the terminology in chapters 15 through 20, which term do you think fits each poem best? Now, I have had students ask in the past if they can have multiple poems have the same term apply best. I think that that's okay, but I want you to explain to me why that term fits each poem. So, for example, if you pick, imagery as your term, and you're like, oh, well, it applies to 2 of my 4 poems. I want you to explain to me how it applies to each poem differently, right? I don't want you to give me the same exact answer for why the term applies to the poem. I want there to be some different detail there. Does that make sense? And then which poem was your favorite and why? Which poem did you like the least and why? So I want to know your favorite poem and the reasons, your least favorite and the reasons of the 4 that you picked. So should be about a page or more, double spaced, 12-point font. I've had a lot of students really like this one because there's a lot of freedom in this post in what you choose, and you guys all kind of find really cool and interesting things to talk about with poetry. A lot of students like being critics. You're like, okay, I like this poem for this reason, I don't like this poem for this reason, and have a lot of fun with it. So that should be a good time. Now, the last assignment I want to talk about is the thesis and outline assignment. So this is just like paper 1. It's just a skeletal framework where you tell me the topic that you picked and then explain to me what your paper is going to be about, and then kind of just the points in either Roman numeral, bullet point, however you want to. I do not want a draft. You can send your drafts to Miss Lane if you want to have her proofread before you turn them in, but I don't want to see drafts right now. I just want to see a framework, just an outline. I took off some points for some of you last paper because you gave me a draft instead of an outline. I'm going to take off even more with this paper because we're at the second paper you should know by now. But just to go over the guidelines for paper 2, you do have some options for this one. And there is a creative writing option as well as just a regular option. There's 2 choices. One, I'm going to talk about option 2 first. You can choose to compare and contrast 2 poems from our textbook. Pretty easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? Just comparing and contrasting 2 poems using the terminology from our chapter to talk about them. Seems pretty simple enough. Or you can construct 2 poems of your own and compare and contrast them using terminology from our textbook. So if you like creative writing, this is a chance for you to kind of flex that creative writing, create 2 poems, and then compare and contrast them. Now, please note, the 3 pages do include the poems, but your analysis itself should be at least 2 full pages, okay? So if you choose to write your own poems, here's the thing. If you choose option number 2, it has to be 3 pages of analysis total, right? If you choose option number 1, then yes, you need to have at least 2 pages of analysis and a page of poems. So that's kind of your choice. If you want to analyze less, you can write your own poetry. But if you don't want to write your own poetry, you're going to have to analyze a little bit more because writing the poetry has been done for you in the textbook, if that makes sense. And if you have any questions about that, you can email me to let me know. You need to cite MLA in your textbook. Some of you did not cite a source for paper 1, and I let it go because you chose the creative writing option. But with this textbook and this assignment, since you are technically being creative, and since you are using your textbook to analyze these poems, you have to use your textbook, all right? That's just the way that it has to go. So you need to cite your textbook in MLA, meaning that you need to have a works cited page on the back, last page of your paper, and you need to use in-text citations. And I'll talk about that in just a second. So it's got the due dates for everything on here. Your draft is going to be due July 2nd. The thesis statement and outline is due this Sunday. And then the point breakdown is right there. Now, I have had some students ask about MLA. I'm assuming you did MLA in English 121, so you should kind of know the basics at this point. But if it's been a while since you did MLA for English 121, or if for some reason you didn't do MLA or forgot, then there is at the very top this MLA sources and citation presentation. Please use this. This is a resource for you, so make sure to use it. Now, the first couple pages of this slideshow are going to be about how to choose sources. You're probably not concerned with that, so just keep scrolling down. Keep scrolling past all that, and you'll get to the point where it talks about in-text citations first. So it'll show you what that looks like. It'll show you the difference between print and web in-text citations. So your in-text citations, if you're citing our textbook, are going to be print. So you're going to be doing this whole author's last name, page number for your in-text citation in the essay itself. And then you have your works cited page, which again, if you're talking about quotation marks versus italics for titles, that's in this slideshow. You can see that here. You'll notice that poem titles are in quotation marks, and that's what you should use for your paper. And then as far as the basics go, your textbook is going to be cited like this: author last name, first name on the works cited page, the book title should be in italics, the publisher and year of publication. And I've given you an example here. Just use that as a model. Again, this first couple paper, I'm having you guys cite an MLA for our first papers because there's going to be a lot of points dedicated to this for your research paper. And I want to make sure that you guys have the basics down before we get there. So just do your best. Again, you're going to get a chance to revise. I'm going to give you feedback. Just be sure to try with the in-text citations and the works cited page for the second paper. All right. As always, though, you guys can always email me with questions. And I'm here on Thursday this week. So I'll be on campus Thursday this week if you're on campus, you want to ask a question. But please feel free to email me. I'm going to be grading on Monday this week, so I'll probably answer emails Monday as well. So if you guys have any questions, please let me know. But otherwise, I'm really excited to see your work. And so I can't wait to read your fiction papers. I'm going to be reading those this week. And I can't wait to see your topics for your poetry paper. So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I will see you all again next week for week 4 of English 122.